Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live. We're going to be talking about the Eastern Conference. We're talking about the future of the East in light of the massive showdown between the Boston Celtics and the once undefeated 15-0 Cleveland Cavaliers. And we're going to talk about takeaways from that game. We're going to break down that game a little bit, but this is going to be mainly about the Toronto Raptors because the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics play in the Eastern Conference. So too do the Orlando Magic, who look fantastic this year. So too do the Philadelphia 76ers and the Milwaukee Bucks, who don't look so fantastic this year. So we're going to look at what I call Project 2026 to 2020 or 2033 and what that looks like for the Toronto Raptors. We're going to talk about the Raptors cap sheet, their flexibility, which pieces can be moved, which pieces can't be moved, won't be moved, which pieces really interest me, and which pieces I would do away and drive to a bus station tomorrow. On your way in, please hit like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. I very much appreciate it. And to the fourth quarter gang, how you guys doing? Hope you're doing well. Hope your day is off to a beautiful start. Okay, Project 2026, 2032. That's really what this game, what this live is generally about. But right now, we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the Boston Celtics, they win. And they could have won by a lot more were it not for them falling in love with the three-point shot, as they often do. But this is the box score for the Cleveland Cavaliers side. They got 22 points and 11 rebounds from Evan Mobley. They got a pretty competent double-double from Jared Allen, who only took 6 shots, shot 5 for 6. They got a disaster class from the once surging Darius Garland, who got absolutely exposed tonight against Drew Holiday and Derek White. And we got a very late surge and a very good game from Donovan Mitchell, who really turned it up late. 3-4-11 from three-point land. But other than that, a really competent 35 points from Donovan Mitchell and a really competent, very like 3 double-digit scores off the bench. The Cavaliers were without Max Strus. They were without Karis LeVert. They were without Isaac Okoro. They were without basically all their small forwards tonight. So you could definitely excuse it and say they weren't very healthy. And honestly, you probably need Isaac Okoro and Karis LeVert to beat the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, of course, as they have been all year, were without Kristaps Porzingis, right? But they did get Drew Holiday back tonight, and he was serviceable at least to start. The Boston Celtics, they get a very good game from Jason Tatum, who was super assertive. 33 points. They get 20 points from Al Horford, who many people thought was going to be a mismatch liability. It wasn't really him who was the mismatch liability. It was Neemias Queta, who was an incredible negative for the Boston Celtics every second he played. Peyton Pritchard put up 13 points off the bench, including a huge 3. He was great. Jaylen Brown was not so great. Derek White was very competent. And overall, I do think that this game it probably shouldn't have been this close, right? It got closer late, and it really didn't feel like it needed to be. I think it was at one point, it was a 20-point lead, 21-point lead, and it felt like the Boston Celtics kind of just took their foot off the gas, and then suddenly it's like Jaylen Brown defense, Neemias Queta defense, Jaylen Brown turnover, offensive foul, defensive foul, just breakdown. But if the Cleveland Cavaliers were thinking to themselves, we are on the Boston Celtics tier right now, I think they're close, but I still think there's a gap. These are the kings of the East right now. Most people would tell you these are going to be the two teams that are going to meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Cavaliers have been much better this year. Much better. Let's take a look at the team stats for a second before we talk about this game more generally, and then we can get into all the Raptor stuff. So in terms of the team stats, Boston was very comfortable tonight. Shot 51% from the field, 53% from 3. They could not miss. They started missing late, but there was a stretch of this game where they were up 20, where it felt like they could not miss, right? The Cleveland Cavaliers, for their part, they shoot a nice 50% from the field pretty much and 35% from 3. Overall, it was a fairly competitive game down the stretch, but it really didn't feel like this one was very, very close, right? Yes, there was an entire controversy today with Shams reporting that the Sixers had a team meeting in which Tyrese Maxey told Joel Embiid basically that there's a disastrous consequence to him being late all the time. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Sixers. We're going to talk about every single team in the East today. So it's going to be a nice little dive for all of us. especially those of you who don't really follow the rest of the league and are more honed in on the Raptors. Well, I got you. I got you because I do follow the entire league. And that's been a huge benefit of being on the panel overall this year. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics at some point, but let's just talk about this game in a general overall sense, and then we'll talk about each team in the East and how they rank out, and sort of do a future power ranking of the East. So Boston tonight, came in. Neither one of these teams have really had huge tests this year, generally speaking, right? The Cleveland Cavaliers have won all the games they're supposed to, and maybe a couple games that they weren't supposed to. They blew the shit out of the Warriors. I think there was 82-42 at halftime, and I just turned that one away. It was really the first test that they'd had up until that point that season, and they passed it with flying colors. The Boston Celtics, on the other hand, they've been in overtime with the Raptors. They've been down the wire with the Brooklyn Nets. They've lost to the Atlanta Hawks. The Boston Celtics have been shaky to start, but you learn not to doubt champions in general. And while I do believe that the Boston Celtics are beatable, largely I felt they were beatable by a team in the West. I didn't really see anyone in the East coming out and beating them. But you gotta give your hat off to there's two teams in the East that I do think that could potentially give them a run for their money, and that's the Orlando Magic and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Orlando, if Paolo comes back and he's healthy, with the way Franz Wagner's playing, with the way Jalen Suggs is able to lock down, with some of their interior pressure, especially if one or two of their young kids can take a step, which is Anthony Black, Jett Howard, somebody in that, and especially if they can get KCP rolling, I do think Orlando is a really competent team. If they can get Jonathan Isaac healthy, I mean that's a beautiful matchup for Jason Tatum, and that's not a matchup that's going to be easy for him. And I just think Jalen Brown's really overrated. I've kind of said it all year that there's a few players in this league that I find very overrated. Jalen Brown is one of them. Cade Cunningham's another one of them. Tonight, Jalen Brown did not prove me wrong. A lot of issues mapping the court, a lot of issues with shot selection, a lot of issues with sort of finishing short. I'm not really a huge fan of him. Player who I am a huge fan of, however, is Donovan Mitchell, and he looked really sharp tonight. He really cooked Neemias Queta off the bounce. I keep calling him Neemias Queta, Neemias Queta off the bounce. I'm not Portuguese, if you can tell. And I really do think some of these issues are going to be shored up when Kristaps Porzingis comes back if he's healthy. But overall, I think there's a tier classification in the East, which starts with the Boston Celtics at the top until someone knocks them off. And then there's like that next tier, which is really, honestly, right now with how New York is playing, with all the issues they have, we're going to talk about all these teams. It's really the Orlando Magic, who are 6-9 right now. If they didn't play tonight, they're 6-9. They've been without Franz Wagner for quite a bit. Jalen Suggs playing out of his mind, shooting crazy from three, shooting crazy from the field, shooting crazy from the free throw line, being a general menace on defense. Franz Wagner, penetrating at will, being a great two-way player. They got a real core there. I know that I trolled the Orlando Magic a lot during the offseason before the season started, but I've generally been very impressed with the Orlando Magic this season, and I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing from Franz Wagner. But beyond that, then you got another tier of teams, which is like the New York Knicks, Philadelphia, if they can figure it out, Indiana, if they can figure it out, Atlanta, if they can figure it out, right? But we got to talk about these teams more in a future sense, right? Because Joel Embiid is showing the signs of age right now. Boston Celtics are showing the signs of bloat right now because there's some of their contracts are going to be damn near unmovable, and they're the highest salary team in the league. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a pretty bright future because all of their core pieces are under 28. But you start to think about, what is Evan Mobley supposed to become, and does he have a chance to actually become that for them to continue that window? When it comes to team building philosophy, I like to think about championship windows, and failing to plan is planning to fail, right? We can all agree that one Achilles tear to your star player and all your plans, your best intention, best laid out plans go out the window. So it won't matter. It really doesn't matter. You can have this dynasty planned out. The OKC Thunder, they have a dynastic 10-year run planned out with every pick and movable contract, cap flexibility, great coaching, everything. And one injury to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, the whole thing kind of crumbles, right? It's a game of inches. And usually it comes down to your stars. How good can your stars be? How healthy can they remain? And how well can you bridge around them? And then how well can you sort of replace the pieces How can you build pieces up? How can you do 3-for-1 trades while continuing to develop? Extending a championship window really comes down to your depth, to your youth, to your development, to your scouting, and how well you consistently do these things. The San Antonio Spurs pretty much dominated the league from 1998, 1999, well, let's say 1997, ever since Tim Duncan got into the league, 97, all the way till about 2016. They're the best example of how to extend a championship window and basically develop new championship windows. How do they do it? Well, first of all, took some luck. Tim Duncan, first overall. It took some great scouting. Tony Parker at 28, Manu Ginobili at 56. But it took some smart trades. Boris Diaw, right? It took some smart signings. It took another smart trade, trading George Hill for Kawhi Leonard. That was a very unpopular move at the time. George Hill was a good player. People forget that. People just like to clown Indiana for like, oh, you guys are idiots for trading Kawhi Leonard. At that time, people didn't know what Kawhi Leonard was going to be. What they knew was that George Hill was a damn good starting point guard. Sometimes you got to get something. You got to give something to get something. And it helps when you have those types of pieces. And I think if you're a Raptor fan, you look no further than the 2019 championship and how that window was opened and reopened. When it first opened, you had players like Terrence Ross, right? Jonas Valanciunas, DeMar DeRozan. Was it Amir Johnson? Amir Johnson there? How many of those players were on the championship team? Exactly one. Exactly one. So while the window was opening 2014, 2015, 2016, and you started to swap the pieces out, right? You developed Terrence Ross into a little bit. You realized maybe we need to go another way. We need something else. Boom, Serge Ibaka. How much less did the Raptors pay for Serge Ibaka than the Orlando Magic had paid for him just a few months earlier? That's smart management. Serge Ibaka was a player that remained on the championship team. Developing DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl and then parlaying that into Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard. That's smart management. But you had to develop those pieces. So it's very difficult to tell somebody in 2014 at the height of the start of We the North that at some point most of these players are going to be out the door, and different players that you don't even know about right now, you don't root for. Who knew about Fred VanVleet in 2014? Some Wichita State fans. Who knew about Pascal Siakam in 2014? When we started the window towards contention and lose to the Brooklyn Nets, how many people knew that the guy that Kawhi Leonard, winning finals MVP for the Spurs that year, would actually be the finals MVP for the Raptors 5 years later? Life changes fast. So I like to think about championship windows like that. Who are your core pieces? Who are your ancillary pieces? Who are the pieces that you need to develop just so you can swap them out? Who are your Terrence Rosses and your Jonas Valanciunas? Pieces that are nice to have right now, but will one day be exchanged for better pieces? And then what are your foundational pieces? Who are you building this around? You want another example? Think about the Warriors dynasty. How many times did that thing change? How many different times was it built around? They had 3 different starting small forwards, and they marked 3 big shifts in that team's culture and identity, going from the first iteration of Harrison Barnes to the second iteration, which was Kevin Durant, to the third iteration, which was Andrew Wiggins. Swap, swap, swap. Because Harrison Barnes was not the foundational piece. He was an ancillary piece. He was a rotation piece. Andrew Bogut, he was on the first one, right? Replaced at some point by Kevon Looney. Some pieces switch around while other pieces remain consistent. If you're the Toronto Raptors, I think the biggest debate in Raptorland right now is what are those pieces that are going to remain the same? What are those pieces that are going to be consistent throughout? And then what are those pieces that are going to get swapped around? So let's talk about the East. Let's talk about who these teams are that the Toronto Raptors are supposed to be competing against. And let's start with the Boston Celtics. Boston's a really good team. We agree with that, right? Boston's a really good team. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are very much in their prime. How long will they remain in their prime? I don't know that. Al Horford is 38 or 39 years old. He'll be out of the league soon. He's going to retire. Drew Holiday is north of 30. Derek White, I'm assuming Derek White's close to 30. So this window that the Celtics have created will probably end in about 2028, at which point they will need to do what they've always done, which is create a new window, presumably around Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, as they swap out some of these older pieces for younger pieces. One of those younger pieces could be Peyton Watson, who exists on the team and is a very good player. Did I say Peyton Watson? I meant Peyton Pritchard. My bad. Peyton Pritchard, who could be a really good player for this team going forward, and is probably a quality starting point guard on most teams. A lot of teams. I won't say most teams, but he's a top 25 point guard in the league, and he comes off their bench. And that's me being very generous. He's very good. Sam Hauser, I'm not moved. Nehemias Keita, I'm not that moved. Jordan Walsh, I'm not that moved. Their future draft capital, average. So they're going to have to upkeep this. But I don't think that they're going to be infallible. I don't think they're going to be unbeatable going forward. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And at some point, they're going to fade, probably around 2028, 2027. This window has been open for this team since 2018, 2019, like they've been going to the Eastern Conference finals. At some point, guys get traded, guys get injured, cap bill gets too big, you rebuild. So I don't think they're going to pose a huge problem for the Raptors as the Raptors come up. But what about this team, the Cleveland Cavaliers? I think a lot of this depends on how good Darius Garland and Evan Mobley can be. Because if Darius Garland becomes the perennial all-star type, which I don't know he can be, and Evan Mobley becomes a defensive player of the year, perennial lock, and a serious two-way player. He hit a 3 tonight. He's been, generally speaking, getting better at the shot. If he can become Bam Adebayo adjacent or maybe more, yeah, that's a scary team. That's a very scary team in the East. And Jack saying Darius Garland was awesome tonight. Yeah, I think he shot 3 for 21 tonight. He was terrible. Generally speaking, he was terrible. And he was absolutely cheeks on defense too. So do the Cleveland Cavaliers scare me after Donovan Mitchell? I won't say they scare me, but they'll be a 45-win team for a while, provided that Evan Mobley becomes what I think he's going to become. And I'm very high on Evan Mobley. Karis LeVert looks like a pretty good piece, but he's 28-ish. So it doesn't feel like they're a rising superpower. None of these teams scare me the way OKC and San Antonio scare me. Like those teams that are coming up against around a budding superstar with a boatload of picks. Those are the teams that really scare you, because those are the teams that have not only the young building blocks, they also have the assets to go after a superstar. I don't think the Cavaliers have the assets to go after a superstar other than the one that they actually have right now. What about the Orlando Magic? This is a team that scares me. I'm going to be honest. This is a team that kind of scares me. Paolo is a beast. He's very big. Franz Wagner is huge. These guys are playing wing. This is one of the biggest teams I think I've ever seen in my life. And Jalen Suggs looks like the real deal. If he can shoot like this, they're a defensive juggernaut. They are very well coached. They are very well managed as well. Jeff Weltman, Anthony Parker, that's a really competent front office. They've done okay on their draft picks, but I wouldn't say they've done great on their draft picks. They certainly could have done a hell of a lot better on the draft picks. Case in point. What if instead of Anthony Black, they had picked Bilal Coulibaly? And that was the 6th overall pick in 2023, my bad. And what if instead of Jet Howard, they had picked Grady Dick? Oh boy. Bilal Coulibaly, Grady Dick. Shoot. Forget Bilal Coulibaly and Grady Dick. What if they picked Derek Lively? What if they pick Cason Wallace? These are the what ifs that are going to haunt you later on when you really do get to that mountaintop and you realize you don't have that one extra piece. Because that's like, you cannot mess up top 10 picks. Can't. You just can't. The Sacramento Kings should know. They've been messing up top 10 picks literally forever. I think they nailed 2. In the last 15 years, I think they've nailed 2 top 10 picks. It's tough, man. So you got to be smart with the draft. You got to capitalize. You got to hit on these things, right? But you also got to understand where you are in the life cycle of your rebuild. The Orlando Magic started rebuilding pretty much 5-6 years ago, didn't they? 4 or 5 years ago. That's around when they started to accumulate losses and really started to put things together. And so they got a 1st overall pick. They got a whole bunch of lottery picks. Cole Anthony was a 15th overall pick. Franz was an 8th overall pick. Jalen Suggs was a 4th overall pick. Anthony Black was a sixth overall pick. Jett Howard was an 11th overall pick. They've had pick upon pick upon pick. This is where they are today. And where they are today is very good. They're a very good team. They're 9-6. They do not have Paolo yet. When Paolo comes back, all the reps that Franz and Jalen Suggs are getting right now are going to be better. They're going to be better off for it. I have long-term belief in Anthony Black. So this is a team that I think their window will open 2025 and probably will remain open as long as they stay healthy. So this is a team that the Toronto Raptors are going to be rivals with and are going to have to fight with very hard. And the problem for the Raptors right now is they're bigger than the Raptors across the board and will beat the shit out of them defensively. So the Raptors are going to have to figure that out. The Atlanta Hawks under Landry Fields. A lot has been said about the Atlanta Hawks, but I actually do respect their moves lately, especially their move to bring in Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels has been a revelation, a two-way menace, an absolute two-way menace. Hold on, let me give me a second to answer some super chats here. Noble Venom, thank you very much for the super chat. Who are you taking long-term between Mobley and Franz? It's a really good question. I'm going to go with Franz Wagner right now. And I got to tell you, that has never been my answer prior to today. And it's not because I saw Mobley play today. It's because I watched Franz play last week. And I just think that there are certain things that Franz is doing as a 6'10 wing that I value so very much. And yeah, I got to say, like, it's close. It's a toss-up. They're both top 3 picks for me in a redraft 2021. Obviously, I'm going to go Scotty number 1. That's my dude, Scotty number 1. But for a very long time, it was Evan Mobley number 2, Franz Wagner number 3. Right now, it's Franz number 2, Evan number 3, Alpi number 4. I might actually go Alperen Şengün adjacent with Evan Mobley. Alperen Şengün's playing out of his mind, right? And that level of offense is very valuable. So you could say Franz, Evan Mobley, and Alperen Şengün right now are having much better years than Scotty Barnes is having right now. And if Scotty Barnes does not catch up, it's going to be a tough ride for him in that 2021 redraft. And a lot of people are going to be picking him 4th, 5th, 6th in redrafts going forward because these 3 have taken a major leap this year. And for 5th, I'm very torn between Cade and Trey Murphy. I know people hate me for that. I don't care. That's where I'm at. Liam, thank you again for the super chat. How long for us to be a top 6 team in the East? Give it a year. Give it a year. The East is very depleted, and I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of these teams. But let's talk about the Hawks. Zachary Risachet, Onyeka Okongwu, Kobe Buffkin, Trae Young. Trae Young's a hell of a point guard. I don't know why he gets as much disrespect as he does, but he's one of the best passers in the league, a great engine. And this is a team headed by Trae Young that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals just a few years ago. They've had some success. Now they got Dyson Daniels. They got DeAndre Hunter. They got Jalen Johnson. They got Zach Risachet. They still got some serviceable role players. Who knows what Onyeka Okongwu and Kobe Buffkin will be, although I will admit Onyeka has not looked as good as I thought he would be. So they got some pieces. They got a lot of defense, and they've knocked off some pretty good teams, including the Boston Celtics, aforementioned Boston Celtics. So if Dyson continues to become the type of player that I do believe he can become, which, by the way, to reiterate my stance on Dyson from 2022, surefire pick, can't miss prospect, I would take him top 4. That's how I am on him. That means I think he can be an all-star. He's 21, 22 years old, right? The upside is so enormous for the Atlanta Hawks. They're a sleeping giant. How will the Trae Young element of this mesh together? That I don't know. But the Atlanta Hawks are a very good team. And I think that they're another team that the Raptors are really going to have to deal with, especially because I really trust Landry Fields in the front office. The New York Knickerbockers, a team that maybe just gave me a lot of concern going forward last year. They made the trade for OG Anunoby. Some say they overpaid maybe. Some say they got the piece that they needed. But they got a little bit Icarus-y about it. To those who don't know the story of Icarus, refresh yourselves on it. It's about a man who decides to fly a little too close to the sun. And I think they got a taste of what it meant to flip 3 assets into 1 asset with the OG trade. And they were like, let's do this 2 more times. You know, Traded RJ and Emmanuel quickly and Jonathan Mobo for OG Anunoby, Precious Achua, and Malachi Flynn. And look at our plus minus. Look at our net rating. Look at our success. We made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals or the Eastern Semifinals against the Indiana Pacers. Okay, cool. And we lost. But you know what we need? We need to do this 2 more times. And that's where they fucked up, in my opinion. That Mikal Bridges trade will go down as one of the worst trades. I don't care how good he becomes. That's not a good trade. 5 first-round picks plus a swap for Mikal Bridges. Bro, I don't know who you think Mikal Bridges is, but he is not that. Y'all realize that Mikal Bridges was a part of a trade for KD? It was multiple picks. Mikal Bridges plus Cam Johnson. And the Nets decided to feature Mikal Bridges as a first option. They made him look very good for a little bit until it all fell apart, and the Knicks should have known better. And then they extracted 5 first-round picks for him. Wow. Wonder if the Raptors could do that with RJ Barrett. My point is, Mikal Bridges is not a superstar. He's not moving the needle. Right now, he can't play defense. And he's getting up there in age. You look at the Knicks core, they're all in their late 20s, early 30s. This is not a team with a very long window. And with Coach Tibbs running the show, they're definitely not going to have a long window. And oh, by the way, your little young assets, your multiple first-round picks that you would have absolutely used to fill out the back of your roster, which is completely depleted right now. Dante DiVincenzo, younger player-ish. Emmanuel Quickly, younger player. RJ Barrett, younger player. Gone. And now what do you have? Okay, Deuce McBride, I'll give you some respect. But you got Precious Achua and Jericho Sims. All right, cool. That's your young unit, young rotation. The Knicks window will close in 2027. Jalen Brunson will not age super well. They will be stuck with a whole bunch of contracts and not a lot of draft picks to move off of them. And the Knicks will continue to nick. I'm not worried about the New York Knicks. But for the first 2 years of Project 2026, 2033, the Raptors will probably have to worry about the Knicks. What about the Indiana Pacers? Talked a lot about the Indiana Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton. I like some of their young pieces a lot. I'm a big believer in Andrew Nembhard. I'm a big believer in Jarris Walker. I like Ben Shepherd. This is good, man. This is a good team on the back end of it. James Barron saying, nothing. Keep doing you. Cool. I don't know what the nothing means, but I appreciate you. Thank you very much for that. That's very nice of you. Maybe you were answering a question of mine. I'm going to leave this up here. It kind of matches. The color of the super chat matches the Indiana Pacers. I'm going to leave it up here as long as I'm talking about the Indiana Pacers. Thank you very much for color coordinating your super chat to the subject message. That's cool. But Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam are the major building blocks, and Miles Turner is going to need an extension at some point. I believe he already has an extension. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, but he's making a little bit more money. He's not restricted. I don't remember. Okay, I don't remember their cap situation with Miles Turner. Somebody tell me in the chat what is Miles Turner's contract. Look it up and just let me know. But overall, I'm not afraid of this team because they've tied up so much money into Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, and I don't believe that duo, given where they are defensively, given how tough they are in big game situations, I'm not necessarily sure that's a team that I'm going to be super worried about when the Raptors get going. Is it a team that's going to be in the playoffs for the next few years? Hell yeah. Absolutely. At best, they become the Atlanta Hawks of Kyle Korver days, right? No, I got you on that. But what about, you know what I'm talking about, right? What about Miles Turner? Turner is just 1 year, $19.9 million. Okay, cool. So they're gonna need an upgrade on that for sure. They're gonna need to re-up that contract. So I mean, at some point you got to look at it. Am I enthused with Ben Mathurin? No. So really, their entire future for me hinges on just how good and how inexpensively can you re-sign Andrew Nembhard. He's not going to be cheap. The league knows who Andrew Nembhard is. He has shown up on some very big stages, and I think he has some very big fans around the league. He's not going to come super cheap. I'm not saying he's going to cost you $30 million, but you're going to pay for him. You're not going to get him on a $10 million extension. So that's going to bloat up your cap sheet a little bit more. Jarris Walker, I believe at some point this guy will prove to be a $20 to $22 million player. I have long-term faith in him. What are they doing with Ben Matherin's contract? I don't know. But he puts up a lot of empty calorie stats. Not enthused with his defense. I just don't think he's become anything that is like what a top 6 pick is supposed to be, right? I'm just not enthused. And again, Ben Matherin, another player that was picked over Dyson Daniels. Make it make sense. You look at Indiana right now. How much could they use Dyson Daniels? They passed on him. You look at a lot of teams that passed up on Dyson Daniels in 2022, and you're like, what were you guys thinking? I'm not being a revisionist historian. This was my take then. This is my take now. Sacramento, you need defense. You need a perimeter defender. Dyson Daniels, amazing. So, anyways, the point here is I'm not that scared of the Indiana Pacers, but I do believe that they will be roughly a 38, let's say 33 to 48 win team and probably a second round and out at best. That's what I think. Personally, I'm just not a big believer in leaders who don't play defense. Tyrese Halliburton does not strike me as the type of player who leads a team to a championship or leads a team super deep, right? So that's kind of my point, right? And at some point, you're gonna wish that you kept some of those picks. They do not have their 2026 pick, which belongs to the Toronto Raptors, top 4 protected. And that might be, a year where Tyrese Halliburton pulls a muscle or, pulls his groin and is out for 30, 40 games. And Pascal Siakam pulls a muscle and he's out. And it's just like, you've given up. I think they've over leveraged themselves. And I think they really overestimated who they think Tyrese Halliburton can be based on what he started out the season as last year. And I don't know if they're going to be right or wrong, but I'm betting they're going to be wrong. Whew, the Philadelphia 76ers. Who are their young talents? Well, Jared McCain is balling out of his mind. Gershon Yabusele is not that young, but he's young by NBA terms. He's a rookie, and he's been really good. When Nick Nurse took the job in Philadelphia, he sold us on this vision that Paul Reed could become Pascal Siakam. Paul Reed is currently in Detroit. They just let him go for nothing. They didn't even care. So I guess he wasn't Pascal Siakam. Joel Embiid looks really bad. Will he get better? Sure. Tyrese Maxey is going to be an all-star for a long time. I think Jared McCain is looking like the best player in this draft so far. He's looked brilliant. Analytically, and the eye test is telling you this guy's going to be a bucket. And he's so young to be this good. Say what you will about his TikTok dances and his painted nails. You cannot deny the game. Jared McCain is a hit. Daryl Morey is really good at drafting. He drafted Tyrese Maxey. The Paul George contract, though, that's tough. You had cap space. You could have leveraged it to something else. You probably could have taken a bad contract and a whole bunch of picks. You decided Paul George was it, probably because you wanted to create a title window around Joel Embiid. Now, when you decide to open your eyes and realize that Joel Embiid is not the type of person who leads you to a championship. Joel Embiid is the type of guy. Let me ask y'all a trivia question. Let me know in the chat if you know. Let me know. When's the last time the Sixers made the Eastern Conference Finals? Go ahead. I'll stop the first time someone names it. Don't cheat. Just keep guessing. I'll let you know if you're wrong. Never is wrong. All of these are right. Tal Kaufman, you're wrong. Daniel, that's crazy. Bro, the NBA wasn't even around back then. Yeah, it was 2001. 2001 was the last time they made an Eastern Conference Finals, which is also the year they made the NBA Finals, in which they were beaten 4-1 after winning Game 1. Allen Iverson stepping over Ty Lue. Give me a W if you remember that. Iconic moment in NBA history. Dikembe Mutombo with the no. It was great. But that's how long the Sixers have been deprived of something that the Raptors have done twice. Sixers haven't won a championship in decades. So you really got to go back to the Hinkie process and say, has it been successful? Was losing year after year after year, putting together these egregious rosters getting rid of Andre Iguodala, trying to build around. I mean, who did they get rid of? They got rid of their best players, didn't they? They got rid of Jimmy Butler. They just let him go to Miami for jack shit, nothing. They didn't get nothing for him. He was probably the best player on that team if you think about it from the winning perspective. He, since going to the Heat, has been to 2 finals or 1 finals and 1 Eastern Conference Finals. He's been to the finals twice. I can't remember. Jimmy Butler is awesome. And he was right to be Tobias Harris over me, but I guess that's what happens when you prioritize youth. When you can't see past Ben Simmons, correctly identifying who you have in your locker room is like one of the biggest markers of success for successful organizations. The Sixers did not know who they had in Jimmy Butler, and they certainly didn't know who they had in Andre Iguodala when they shipped him off to Denver, I believe. That's a Finals MVP. And that's a guy who probably would win Finals MVP one day if he ever wins a championship. There were some great players to lose. And then going all in on Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Paul George, these are the players you've decided to go all in on. Something rotten in the state of Philadelphia. I know it's the state of Pennsylvania. Don't worry. I'm not dumb when it comes to geography. I'm not that dumb when it comes to geography, but you get my point. Like, there's something bad with this team, and I'm not really sure Nick Nurse is it. I'm not really sure this youth is it. I'm not really sure Joel Embiid is it. So I'm not really scared of this team because I don't trust them. I trust them to be really scary if they're healthy, but I don't trust them to be healthy. And this year they are, by the way, if you haven't looked, they're the worst team in the league right now, per the record. The Charlotte Hornets, Brandon Miller, Trey Mann, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges. Interesting. Don't scare me. You know why they don't scare me? Don't trust LaMelo Ball. As a leader, I don't think he prioritizes the right stuff. I don't think he has the right maturity. And no, it is not just his no homo comment. It's not just, what he does with his off time. I like LaMelo Ball. Overall, I like him. Be you, do you. I don't care. I like people who are themselves. But at some point, you got to be serious about basketball. Serious enough to want to play defense. Serious enough to be disciplined with your jump shots. Serious enough to call out a teammate who's going out of pocket. It's really difficult to do that it's really difficult to win championships when your best player isn't a championship player. And I don't think LaMelo Ball is a championship player. It takes something to win, and I don't think he has it. Are they going to be fun? They're going to be hella fun. Now, the Washington Wizards. Why are the Wizards here? Well, as much as I disagreed with their pick of Alex Sarr, I understand the longer term a vision of him. Would I have preferred that they probably pick Reed Shepherd? Hell yeah. Would I have preferred that they pick Donovan Clingan? Probably. But I understand them picking Alex Sarr. I really like their pickup of Bilal Coulibaly, though. But I hated their trade of Denny Avdia. But they're doing the right thing this year, which is they're tanking, which means they're probably going to get a top 3 pick, which means they're probably going to add a really good young player to a really a blossoming core, which includes 2 players that I do believe in, which is Bilal Coulibaly and Bub Carrington. And so maybe this is a team that is going to start rising, especially if they are the team that gets Cooper Flag, which very well could happen, right? Cooper Flag in the nation's capital? Sure, that makes sense. So if that is what happens, if it is Cooper Flag to the Wizards, then Bilal Coulibaly plus Cooper Flag in Washington plus Bub Carrington plus a boatload of draft picks plus probably another 2026 early first round pick because they're still going to be bad, is probably the type of thing that opens up their contention window a year later than the Raptors, at which point they will be doing so with a lot of high-end talent. And I do believe that Bilal Coulibaly is going to be like a real force to be reckoned with. So that's why they're here. I do believe in them. Absolutely. I don't know how much I believe in the Detroit Pistons. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I do. Johnny Acinghouse Sarr. He's a good shot blocker. Right now, it's about it. He's a good athlete. He can handle the ball a little bit. I'm not really sure about his jump shot, but there's potential of that developing. A more advanced Ulrich Chamche. Maybe that's a little bit cruel, but that's how it feels sometimes. His worst games are really bad. But it'll come down to how hard he's willing to work. All these young kids, 18, 19 years old, it'll all come down to how hard they're willing to work. But the Detroit Pistons, a team that is building around a foundational core of Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, and they look like they're trying to be competitive this year, probably to wash away the feelings of, the embarrassment of last year. But this is the worst year to tank. The worst year to tank. This is a team that back-to-back years has subjected their fans to some of the most egregious forms of losing in the league and has fallen back in the draft from first to fifth in back-to-back years, as if the league is just slapping them in the face saying, you don't deserve another first overall pick after what you've done with Cade Cunningham. Your GOAT, a Pistons fan, saying any chance of us being a playoff team is for Asar and Ron to get a decent jump shot and for Duren to learn defense. Well, Jalen Duren really has not moved me defensively, and I'm glad you brought him up because he's a player that I had a lot of faith in. Asar is a player that I continue to have a lot of faith in, and I have been looking at his mechanics lately, and they have looked a little bit better. So hopefully when he comes back, now that the blood clot issue has cleared up, I'm actually pretty optimistic that Asar Thompson is going to be a demon on the defensive end, and that's exactly what you need, and that he'll be a competent knockdown shooter at some point in his career, at which point you get Ron Holland off the bench, you get Jaden Ivey. At some point, these guys are all going to need extensions, right? And you are Detroit, so you're probably going to overpay for a lot of them. And so you do lock yourself into this core, and I'm not sure I see a star there, Am I moved by Cade Cunningham's triple doubles? No, I'm not. As I said, he's looked better. But you got to understand, for me, what better is. I'm a guy who thought that Cade Cunningham wasn't a top 10 player in the 2021 draft class. So for me to say he's borderline top 5 is moving up a lot for me, but that doesn't really move the needle at all because I still think there's a seismic gap between him and Franz Wagner, him and Alperen Sengun, him and Scotty Barnes, him and Evan Mobley. Just because I think he's marginally better than Jalen Green and on the same level as Jalen Suggs doesn't mean that I would want to build a franchise around Cade. In fact, there's 3 scouts that I trust and 1 trainer that I trust, and I asked them all the same question last year. Would you build a franchise around Cade Cunningham? I just brought up this conversation. Every one of them said no, 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 and no. And none of them offered a reason why, which I thought was hilarious. Because they felt they didn't need to offer a reason why. They just thought the question was so egregious. So that's where I'm at. Ron Holland's probably not a star. Jaden Ivey's probably not a star. I just think you'll have a whole bunch of secondary, tertiary type of pieces. Like an entire team of guys whose maximum upside is Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. But where's your Nikola Jokic? Where's your Kawhi Leonard? You need that piece to really compete. So I think the Pistons will be a 45-win team at best if everything clicks, and a 30-win team at worst. I don't think they're going to be super bad anymore. I don't think they're going to be like the 12, 15 loss type of teams. But I also don't see what the upside is for them. So I'm not really scared of this team going forward. I'm not very optimistic about their future at all. Now let's talk about the Toronto Raptors and their future first-round picks. And then we're going to talk about their salary structure, how much each player is making, who's expiring, all that stuff. And then we're going to break down every single player into a list. I've named these lists very creatively, and you're going to see what I mean. But for now, let me make this a little bit bigger. And these are the picks that are coming up for the Toronto Raptors. So in 2025, they have their own first-round pick right now, which looks very appetizing. Their own first-round pick looks like a top 5 pick. Touch wood. By the end of the year, some fans may be disappointed to hear that maybe it's a top 13 pick or a top 14 pick, at which point you're going to cry, but relax. This is a front office that has picked well at 13, 19, 23, 27. It doesn't matter where they pick. And trust me, this is the type of draft where you'll be very happy picking slightly outside the top 5. Like you're going to get a really good player regardless. You may not get the type of franchise altering talent that you'll get in the top 3, but you'll still get a starter level player. You'll still get a Grady Dick level player for sure. Okay. So they got the 2025 pick. They got their Portland 2025 second round pick, which thank God Davion Mitchell, thank God Sacramento Kings for that pick, because I might be just as excited about that pick as I am about the Raptors pick, because this is a pretty damn deep draft. And those players in that 25 to 35 range right now, which optimistically the Portland Trailblazers is going to be really bad this year. 7'3" centers who can shoot, check. Two-way guards who can score, check. You know what I mean? Big playmakers who can handle the ball, check. It's like this entire draft is just full of the archetype that the Raptors love. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Raptors try to add another second-round pick in this draft. I actually wouldn't be surprised to try to add another first-round pick, but they won't be cheap. So look out for that when they do make a trade. Then they got their 2026 first-round pick. They got Indiana's 2026 first-round pick, which is looking pretty appetizing right now, to be honest, protected 1 through 4. And they have their own second-round pick in 2026. So you can pretty much earmark that as 5 young players. If you don't move those picks, those are 5 young players of some consequence, right? I mean, we've seen the Raptors pick top 20 many times. How many times do they strike out? Bruno Caboclo is the only one that comes to mind. It's like, oh, that's not a good pick. But the most of them work out. Most of them are pretty competent. And of course, the Raptors are in aggressive rebuild mode. Dan Tolzman, Masai Ujiri, they got great scouts. And now they got this great development staff that's making miracles out of everything. Shit, bring all the young kids. Bring all the talent. Bring Cooper Flag. Bring Ace Bailey. Bring Dylan Harper. Bring Yegor Demon. Bring them all, man. Bring them all. Shit, trade away everybody. Get 5 first-round picks. Yeah, like John Hamilton always with the, very sharp mind for, keeping a buzz of all the scouting, always good with the names. But yeah, man, there's centers, there's players that might slip right now, players that are being mocked top 13, top 14, guys like Colin Murray Boyles, which might slip down to the end of the first round, and who knows, what it might take to move up, like 4 picks. Sometimes there are teams that have a 26th pick that'll happily move, to 34, 32, just to get off the commitment, to get the salary flexibility, right? At which point you could trade a future second round pick plus 34 to move up a couple spots. It helps. And also, I mentioned this before, it really helps to have all your picks because now you get more players in the door, right? And you don't know what you might do with those players. That's the cool thing about it, right? So one of the major things with draft cycles is when you go in with a very narrow pick, right? Like let's say you only have the first pick, first overall pick or bust. Or let's just say you only have the 38th pick and that's all you have. Most people won't work out for you. They won't work out for you. First round guys probably don't think they're going to work out for it. But you know what the problem is? There's 42 to 45 guys who swear they're going first round every single year. And by mathematics, 12 to 15 drop every year. And now, because you only had the 30th overall pick, 7 of them didn't work out for you. That's a problem. Well, when you have the 31st pick or the 33rd pick and you have the 8th pick, now you can get almost everybody to work out for you. You can get guys mocked at 20 thinking maybe I could rise up to 8. You can get guys mocked at 5 thinking I might fall down to 8. Sometimes it helps. It really helps to be in that middle zone. And it helps to have multiple picks, especially in 2026, where the Raptors will likely have, unless they trade it, their own Indiana's and a second round pick. 3 picks in a really good draft. So that's going to be good for the Raptors. So, and then of course they have all their picks going forward, 2028, 2027, 2029, everything is there. So if the Raptors do decide to make a monster trade, that's what it's going to be. Then you have your cap sheet, right? To those of you who don't look at this every single day, just take a look here, right? The red is a player option, and the Jakob Poeltl player option is for 2026, 2027. Yak has 3 more years left on his deal. Bruce Brown is an expiring. RJ Barrett has 3 years left on his deal. Emmanuel Quickley just signed a fresh $32.5 million a year contract for 5 years. Chris Boucher is an expiring. Scotty Barnes, his max extension kicks in next year, and it's looking very unlikely that he's going to get the supermax hike on that. Davion Mitchell is a qualifying offer that I will almost bet every penny I own the Raptors will not pick up. $8.7 million for Davion, which would be egregious. The Raptors are not bringing that onto their cap sheet. You can bet money on that. The only reason that the 6.5 is on their cap sheet right now and he wasn't waived is because the Kings picked it up before they traded him. Okay. Then you got Grady Dick. Oh boy, he's not going to be cheap. Let me tell you that right now. Grady is not going to be cheap. He is currently making 4.7. Then he's making 4.9. Then he's making 7.13. That'll be the last year. That 10.5 year will be waived, and basically his extension will kick in that year. And I'm going to guess his extension is going to start somewhere north of $28 million. It might start north of $32 million. He might be a $35 million player. He's going to be really expensive. What about Ochai Agbaji? Well, he makes 4.3. They picked up his option for next year, which is 6.38, at which point they'll need to extend him at some point. He'll become extension eligible, I want to say this offseason. I'm pretty sure it's this offseason he'll become extension eligible. Yeah, that makes sense. Because he's drafted a year after Scotty. So yes, he'll be extension eligible this offseason. I wouldn't mind locking him in for 15 million a year, 14 million a year, 12 million a year. If he keeps this up, like he's a role player, he should be signed north of the mid-level. I think that's fair. Jacoby Walter is going to be a nice cheap contract to have as a rotation player for the next 4 years on that rookie deal because he's the 19th overall pick. It's a pretty cheap contract, which was signed at 125% of the cap. So that is 3.4, 3.6, 3.8, and then 5.8 in that fourth year, at which point likely you'll sign him, Garrett Temple, veteran minimum, to be waived. Sorry, not waived, probably be brought back on a veteran minimum next year or just outright waived. Bruno Fernando probably going to get waived at some point this season, although he has had some encouraging games. Jonathan Mopo, 2 years, and then the third year is a team option on the third year. I think him and Jamal Shedd have the identical. It's a team option on the third year, at which point, you'll probably sign them if they work out for you, which is great. And then you have Jamison Battle, who's on a 2-way contract. He's got to be converted at some point, right? Ulrich, his contract is really strange, right? He's on a 2-year, 2-way contract. I don't really know you could do that, but cool. So he's on a 2-year. I would like to extend Jamison Battle really soon. I might be a little bit panicky about this, but I just think that some team is going to see the value in him and is probably going to try to sign him to a full mid-level. Maybe that's ambitious because a lot of teams that maybe would see him more as like a $4 or $5 million type of player, but shooting gets paid in the NBA and he's shown competitive, fire on defense as well. I think he could be a piece long term, and obviously Ulrich and DJ Carton. The jury is still out on these two, but I have a lot of faith in Ulrich long term. And the good thing about Ulrich is he's probably not going to pop before you have to pay him, at which point you sign him to the extension, you sign him to, I don't know, 15 million for 3 years or something like that, and then he pops in year 2 and you're like, great, we got a real backup center here. Okay, so that's that. Now we got to talk about what is untouchable for the Raptors, and that is Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, and the 2025 first round pick. Those are, to me, the pieces you can guarantee will not be traded at any point this year. There's no chance in hell the Raptors are trading Grady. I really believe that. Unless someone calls and says, hey, ring, ring, we'll give you Victor Wembanyama. Cool. Okay, yeah. We'll give you Cooper Flag. Okay, sure. But that's not going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen for anything less than that. They really believe in him. I mean, I feel it. And genuinely, from tracking this team as long as I have, from listening to this team, how they talk about him, to listening to how Darko talks about him, the way Darko's talking about him, the way Ivo Simic is talking about him, it sounds like he's foundational. He's a guaranteed starter for the next 10 years for this team. They really believe in this kid. So that to me makes him pretty much untouchable. He has shown an ability to work. He's a big playmaker. He is growing. He's going to get stronger. That shot is going to be, very unstoppable. This is not a Kevin Huerter, Bogdanovich situation. No. This is not a, Corey Kispert situation. No, this is probably a lot closer to a Dražen Petrovic, Reggie Miller, Klay Thompson type of situation, at which point you don't let go of players like this. He's 20 years old. He's 20 years old, getting some of the hardest shots in the world, and he's making them. And he's competing defensively, and he's coachable, and he's incredible. Scotty, same thing. Everything I said, yes. He was an all-star at the age of 23. He's a team builder, culture builder. Love him. The Raptors love him. They're building this whole thing around him. And until he shows them that they can't, they will continue to try. So that the 2025 first round pick, I had some takes where I've said I might consider trading that pick prior to the season because I thought the Raptors were going to be so good. And now it seems like that pick might be the second biggest asset on this team currently. It might be the third biggest asset after Grady and Scotty. And I mean, it's worth a lot, especially because of the potential that it represents, because of the team building element that it represents. You see, you look at some of the more expensive players on this team that are going to fade away, but even players that you might consider expensive who aren't that expensive, like Jakob Poeltl, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, by NBA terms are not that expensive at all, but are maybe expensive relative to rookie contracts. Well, think about how many rookie contracts you're going to be able to add at the tail end of your roster over the next couple of years. Over the next 3 years, you'll be able to add 7 young players to this team. And what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to take players like Jacoby, maybe, players like RJ, maybe, players like Jakob, maybe, players like Emmanuel Quickly, maybe, and flip them 3 for 1, 2 for 1, or maybe 3 for 3, 2 expirings plus a star coming back or something like that. That's the concept of team building that the Raptors have employed historically, right? It was asset plus Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka. It was asset DeMar DeRozan plus asset Jakob Poeltl plus asset first round pick for Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, right? It was asset Jonas Valanciunas, asset DeLon Wright for asset Marc Gasol. Plus they added a first round pick there too. So you see what I mean? The 3 for 1 is a swap that the Raptors are very comfortable doing. They're perfectly fine doing it. Ironically, the 3 for 1 thing holds true for the Jakob Poeltl trade as well, doesn't it? Tough times. However, I'll share a stat with you that might blow your mind. I don't know if you follow this on X. Here's a fun stat. Jakob Poeltl is the first player in NBA history to have 90 points, 20 offensive rebounds, 20 defensive rebounds on 70% shooting since Shaquille O'Neal in 1994. January 19th to January 22nd, 1994. It's been 30 years. That's crazy. Okay. I say this. I think that these are the 3 untouchable things on the roster. Let's move on to something that's not untouchable, but it's still pretty untouchable. We'll call it untouchable-ish. And that is Emmanuel Quickly, Jacoby Walter, the 2025 second round pick from Portland, the 2026 Indiana pick, top 4 protected, and the 2026 Toronto Raptors pick. I'm basically telling you in no uncertain terms that I think Emmanuel Quickly and Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, and Scotty Barnes are the most untouchable players on this team right now. It's largely because they're young, they're under 25, and they fit what the Raptors are trying to do with their offensive philosophy. Movement shooters around Scotty is the way to go, right? Cutters, movement shooters, two-way players, right? So you don't want defensive liabilities. You don't want severe one-way liabilities. You don't want low IQ players. You don't want non-shooters. You don't want non-passers. You don't want non-playmakers. And you don't want older players. So basically that's the litmus test here. You know what I mean? And then of course the picks just represent blind potential. They're untouchable-ish, but they can be moved. If it meant, as I mentioned, second draft guys, Scoot Henderson, etc., Jabari Smith, if they see a young player in the Ochai Agbaji mold, you know what sucks? You know who's not on this list that needs to be on this list that I completely forgot to put on this list? Untouchable-ish, Ochai Agbaji. Just make a mental note, Ochai Agbaji is on the untouchable-ish list as well. I don't think he's going anywhere. I really don't. I think they love him. I think Masai's loved him forever. I think, I've talked about it numerous times in articles and Facebook posts, etc., how much Masai Ujiri believes in this kid prior to the 2021 draft, how much he's guided him, his relationship with his father. And also, this team just values workers. Look at who they've really valued over the years. Fred, Pascal, OG, Kyle, like DeMar. Like they really just they want to give endless chances to people who work hard. It's almost like you could be a little bit ass at basketball, but as long as you show that you're committed and you're pretty good, they'll keep giving you a chance. So they really value hard work, and that's sort of the organizational value structure. Their North Star is, team first guys who work hard, who have a chance to be special. Ochai Agbaji has a chance to be a really special defender, very versatile defender. He definitely belongs on this untouchable-ish list, but I knew I forgot somebody, and it was definitely Ochai. Oh, shut up. I'm just kidding. Nice to have you is basically a list of guys that you're perfectly happy to keep, provided the price is right and nothing really great comes along that blows you away, right? Guys who could perfectly fit in for the next 10 years, but you're not married to them. You're not obsessed with the idea of like, we got to have this guy at any cost, any price. Oh my God, it's got to be that. Jakob Pertl, RJ Barrett, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Jamison Battle, Garrett Temple. Garrett Temple, obviously the elder statesman here. It's not about, anything other than his contract, how long he wants to keep doing this. That's fine. SP saying, does Ochai get the Herb Jones extension? Honestly, man, the Herb Jones extension is stupid. Herb Jones should fire his agent. Herb Jones should have gotten a hell of a lot more. Ochai will probably get that because the Raptors like to overpay their players. But I think that would be a really nice benchmark for what Ochai gets, especially if he keeps the shooting up for an entire year. You can't really approach, the good thing about the Ochai thing, you don't have to make the decision right now. You have to make it at the end of the season. The bad thing is you have to make it at the end of the season, at which point, if he keeps us up for a full year, he's probably going to internally know that he's worth more. And because, I hate to say it, there's a personal attachment to this player, his story, you're going to want to take care of him. So don't be surprised if he keeps us up for a whole season. You're going to see Ochai Abaji at like a $16 million extension. You heard it here first. Alamina Brian, close your eyes. You're not going to like what comes next. Okay. So pretty self-explanatory. Jakob Pertl, I think, could be a really, really big part of what this team does. It's been very interesting to watch him function as an almost like star level player the last few games. But I'll remind you that running your offense through Jakob Pertl has led you to being a bottom 5 offense and a bottom 5 defense in the NBA. Well, no. Bottom 5 offense is cap. You've been a bottom 15 offense for most of the season. There was a time when you were peaking up to 12th when you had Scotty, but I think it fell down a little bit more. And you've been a bottom 5 defense. I think he's a really big part of both, right? I think he and RJ sustain your offense. They keep you kind of afloat, but they don't take you to the upper echelon to the next level. But you know what's interesting? Neither did Pascal, neither did OG, neither did Fred. It's been a long time since the Raptors have had a top 10 offense. Pretty long time. It's been at least 4 years. So I think that Jakob Pertl can function probably in a lower usage role because both him and RJ Barrett have been super turnover prone, and they've been a lot of the reasons the Raptors have been as good as they've been. They've also been a large part of why they've been bad as they've been. They're not suited to the usage that their combined usage is north of 50%. That's crazy. That's really nuts. Like that's egregious. This should be a fourth and fifth option, third and fifth option, maximum second and fourth option on a half decent team. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself, where would a Jakob Pertl be in the pecking order on a good team? Where would he be on New York? Probably be fourth, fifth, right? Where would he be on Boston? Fifth. Where would he be on Philly? Fifth, fourth. Philly's not a good team, but I mentioned them. Where would he be in Denver? He'd be a backup big, right? So you got to scale it. At some point, you're gonna have to beat some of these teams, and it does matter. So I think to be perfectly happy with him being a 20-minute big off the bench, he has similarities to Tim Duncan, other than the fact that he really can't shoot. He has a lot in common with Tim Duncan. I compared them when he got drafted a couple weeks later. I did a cross comparison between him and Tim Duncan. He has a lot in common with him. The difference is Timmy D was a great defender. Up until Tim Duncan was 38 years old, Tim Duncan remained a great defender. Jakob Pertl has not been a great defender in a few years. And that is the part of his game that's really missing. And I wonder if his usage goes down a little bit offensively, will he be able to hone in a little bit more defensively? But I got to tell you, bad news. The defensive regression has been on a sharp decline for the last 3 years. And you really do need a player who can't shoot to be a really good defender. You can't have both. You can't be a negative spacer on offense, in terms of the shooting threat, and also not an overwhelming positive defensively. So that's the tough part with Jakob, which may see him more of a backup big at some point. But the best version of the Raptors is with a starting big who can shoot, in my opinion. It's going to create much more of an opening for Grady and whatever. But it's interesting to note that Darko Rakovic himself said that he saw Jakob Pertl as a Domantas Sabonis type. Well, if that is in fact the goal is kind of working. He's kind of playing the Domas role right now. The issue is he's a much worse passer than Domas. He's a much less skilled offensive player than Domas. You can double Domantas Sabonis, he'll still score. I don't think you can double Jakob Poeltl and have him still score. You can double Domas and he will still most likely find a great shot. I don't think Jakob Poeltl finds a great shot. Jakob is averaging almost as many turnovers as he is assists. That's not Domas and that's not Nikola Jokic. You can keep trying to pretend he's this player. And maybe it boosts his trade value to the point where you do get a much better offer for him. Maybe that's what the Nets did with Mikal Bridges. Maybe that's what we're doing with Jakob Poeltl. Maybe that's what we're doing with RJ Barrett. But I got to tell you, for his sake, he's probably not on the timeline. He's 29 years old. Your best players are 20 and 23. Your third best player is 24. Does he fit for the next few years? Yeah, but he's probably going to be more of the Terrence Ross tier. And that's really what this entire group is. This is a Terrence Ross tier, right? RJ Barrett, weak side cutter, slasher, developing shooter, much better playmaker, same issue, defense. Can we get it up? Longer term complication is that Scotty is probably going to have to play 4 to accommodate a lineup with both RJ, Emmanuel Quickley, and Grady Dick. And I don't know if that trade-off is worth it. Or RJ is going to go to the bench, which I also don't think is going to happen because I think he probably sees himself as a starter and probably correctly so. So it's just a really awkward fit. And I think the defense makes it even more awkward. Yes, he scored 39 points last night. Yes, he's a very good young player. That's good. If that means at some point the New York Knicks are like, hey, not the New York Knicks, sorry, the Chicago Bulls are like, hey, we'd like to give you a first-round pick and Matas Buzelis and this contract for RJ Barrett because we think he's the option or the next star next to Josh Giddey for us. Cool. Now you got much more because the numbers were good. I don't know. I think the Raptors have taken on the process of rehabbing RJ Barrett's value, and I think they're doing a really good job of it. Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk are just great system players. They really fit well. They're smart basketball players. Bruce is a great cutter. Kelly is a great spacer and a great dribble handoff guy, really like a point forward center. And I think he just works. Jameson Battle has been a revelation this year. He's been really good. And I think they would probably prefer to keep him if the price is right. We'll see what his extension looks like. And Garrett Temple, self-explanatory. I think he's a very, very good vet and very valuable. And by the way, Garrett Temple led the Raptors last night in box plus minus with 19.9. So there's a fun stat for you. Kinder surprises. These are the mystery boxes. These are the guys that can go anywhere. We don't know where they're going to go. They can go up. They can go down. They could be off the team in a couple of years. They could be on the team the next 10 years. It's too soon to tell. What is Jamal Shed? I think a lot of it's going to depend on the jump shot, the floater range stuff, how well he competes on defense, and how error-proof he can be. Can't have more nights like last night. I said Garrett Temple was a positive 19.9 box plus minus. Jamal Shed was a negative 19 box plus minus last night. He killed the Raptors, and it showed. You didn't need analytics to tell you that. It was obvious. Ulrich is a work in progress. He is going to be a work in progress for a while. But I think this is a work in progress that is worth investing in. And I think that when the Raptors contend 2026 to 2033, that window, I think he'll firmly be at least on just the tip of the rotation at that point. Maybe he'll be the third big, maybe he'll be the backup center. I don't know if he'll be the starting center. Maybe that would require a lot of growth. But as Joe Tuomo said, if it takes the average prospect 6 years, it'll take Ulrich 3. Cool. So maybe instead of 2 years away from being 2 years away, he's only 1 year away from being 1 year away. We'll see. And Jonathan Mobo, we've seen twitchiness. We've seen great playmaking chops, potential for, rim protection. We've seen some good offensive rebounding. We've also seen some very shaky moments, haven't we? Right? His eventual progression in the NBA will be as a wing. His comfort shooting threes is going to keep him on the court. He's got to be able to shoot threes at least as well as Jarris Walker, and that's going to be really tough. It's interesting to draft Jonathan Mobo a year after I was clamoring for us to get Jarris Walker because I do see a lot of similarities in them. Jarris is much younger. Jarris is a much better shooter. Athletically, they're very similar. Watch them play. They're pretty similar. I think Jonathan might be even a twitchier athlete. And actually, that's not even a might. He is a twitchier athlete. So I think Jonathan, just like Ochai, when you see special athletes who care about the defensive end of the game, you just pray very hard for the offensive breakthrough. Yeah. And of course, 2027, 2028, Toronto first round picks. These are complete kinder surprises. We don't know if they'll be traded, if they'll be moved with a player to get a major upgrade. Maybe they'll be moved with a player to get off a bad contract the Raptors sign. I have no idea. I really don't. But neither do you. None of us know what that is. And then what about the final basket? And that is gone in 60 seconds. I'm so sorry. That's Davion Mitchell, Chris Boucher, Bruno Fernando, and DJ Carton. Now, I'm not really sure if DJ Carton belongs on this list. He's quite young and he has shown quite a bit of progress to me, but he does not strike me as a point guard at all. He strikes me as a bouncy two who's undersized as hell, who often struggles to run point. And I'm not really sure with this many young players coming in how much time they're going to give to him. You know, it's interesting. Sometimes we fall in love with young players, right? We really do. You know, I really believed in Justin Champagnie, Jeff Doughton, Christian Coloco, right? Like I went to bat for these guys. I really did. But they're gone. They're just gone. Just like that. Just gone. Some of them you didn't get nothing for. Actually, you didn't get anything for any of them. Are they better than some of the guys you have in your bench right now? I'm willing to bet yes. Yes, they are better than some of those guys. For sure, they're better than some of those guys, but not enough that it warrants panic. So again, it's important to kind of get detached from the fact that your player drafted a guy or has a guy on their team and this guy is looking really good right now, and just kind of look at the broader perspective and just say, did Stanley Johnson and Monte Hollis Jefferson have good games every now and again? Sure. Did James Johnson have some good games? Sure. Amir Johnson? Sure. Terrence Ross? Sure. They're gone, 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 gone. They're all gone, right? You got to really weed through what is permanent and what is temporary. And I think all these players are temporary. Is Chris Boucher playing great? Yeah, man. He's leading the team right now in box plus minus. He has been a demon off the bench. Some nights he's the only player who can score off the bench. But when the Raptors are good, I don't see a world in which Chris Boucher is on this team because y'all not seeing the mistakes he's making. Maybe you are seeing the mistakes you're making, mistakes he's making. Maybe you're really smart about basketball and you're seeing the 7, 8, 9 offensive, issues that he has every game. The 7 times he doesn't read a play correctly or doesn't make a pass correctly or takes a shot out of rhythm or impacts the spacing in a negative way, or maybe you're one of those people who just sees the blocks and the hustle and it's just really attached to having somebody on this team that won a championship with this team even though they didn't really play that year. I don't know. But there you go. Delano Banton's another one, isn't he? Delano Banton, Justin Champagnie, Jeff Doughton and Delano Banton are playing minutes on other teams, occasionally at least. Jeff's played minutes for Philadelphia this year, even though they're the worst team in the league. And Delano has played minutes for another really terrible team. Delano played minutes for the Celtics last year, right? It's tough sometimes to see somebody else get your player. I saw some people crying over Brandon Carlson the other day. I got news for you. Don't cry. You don't need to cry about that. It really is. Steve Ed saying, Brooklyn not happy with this winning. Yes, that was our secret plan all along. Give Dennis Schroeder to the Brooklyn Nets so that he could win basketball games for them. Smart. Genius, actually. Dennis is a Darko spy. He remains faithful to the tank. And maybe if we do get Cooper Flag, we need to build a statue of Dennis Schroeder. It's a mud statue. Don't worry. It'll melt the next time it rains. Anyways. Any more to say about this? Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell is a guy that, I say gone in 60 seconds, largely because I really don't think he has a real perspective on what he's worth on the contract level, and he'll probably want a little bit more than we're willing to offer. But I don't think he's a minimum guy next year. And with 3 players potentially, 2 players coming in next year, including maybe an undrafted guy, plus all the young players you already have on this team, plus the fact that you're trying to get better, man, I don't think you're going to throw Jamal Shed or Jameson Battle or Uwe Shamshay away, You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you're going to throw these guys away to keep Davion Mitchell. I think Davion is a really nice piece to have right now. He's kind of competently manning the unit until, Jamal Shed can figure it out. Maybe he's being a veteran voice to Jacoby Walter. I've mentioned in previous live that maybe it's just nice to have a lottery pick who didn't work out just to show people, hey, you can work super hard, be a lottery pick, and still fail in the NBA. Maybe that's all a part of the plan, you know, to throw Davion out there. But I do think he'll be gone. And Bruno Fernando is just, I think he might be gone this year. So that's where I stand on all these players. And now to answer the big elephant in the room, can the Raptors compete in the East? When will they compete in the East? And how competitive can they be? And what do they need if they can't be competitive? So when do they compete? 2026 would be the window opening for me. 2026. So that's next year. 2025, 2026. I think maybe they come out rocky next year because they're implementing a new rookie. But I think sometime around the midseason, they turn it around and then they just go balls out for the rest of it. If they make the playoffs, cool. If they don't, that's also cool. It's perfectly fine. I think that it's important to realize that the Orlando Magic followed a very similar trajectory a couple years ago. You all noticed that the Magic were terrible, and then they suddenly turned it around Christmas, and they were beating everybody, and they were beating the Clippers, and they went into Boston. They beat the Boston Celtics, and we're like, "What the hell? What is this team?" And they haven't looked back since. It happens like that. Sometimes it clicks. Could it click at the end of this year? Sure. But I'm just betting that the window will be open from 2026 onward. Now, the cool thing about windows with talented young rosters is sometimes the talent is like the difference between talent, like theoretical talent, and greatness is greatness shows up every day. Talent shows up once a week. And, it's nice. Shaden Sharp, talented. Scoot Henderson, talented to a lesser degree, right? Greatness is Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic. These guys are bucket getters. They come through every night. So you got to take your talented players to make them great. They got to show them consistency. Scotty Barnes right now is really talented. Can he carry you through an entire playoff series? That'll be the mark of greatness, right? Grady is really talented. There are certain nights where you watch him and you really see Drazen Petrovic, and then there are other nights you watch him and you see Adam Morrison. You're like, I don't know which of these are you going to be? Can't be both. You certainly cannot be as bad as Adam Morrison some nights. Grady Dick had a -7-ish box plus minus last night. He was not good. Not good at all. They really bothered him last night. They did a number on him. So you got to take a look at something like that and say, okay, so at some point you're gonna have to convert all this theoretical potential and young players into like guys who show up every single night, who understand how to pick their spots, or you can bank on them. They're not gonna have like an 8 turnover game, or they're not gonna have egregiously stupid games. I mean, once in a while, sure, but most nights, like what can I bank on you to do on a Tuesday in the man's mind? In the words of my friend Chilltown Hoops, shout out Chilltown Hoops. So what can I count on you to do on a Tuesday? That's what you're gonna have to get from Scotty Barnes. That's what you're gonna have to get from Grady, guys like this. So at that point, you'll open up a window to be somewhat competitive, at which point you're now bracing yourself up to be a championship contender, ideally by 2027, 2028. Like you want to just get to the dance. And then maybe if you see something really enticing at the playoffs, then you have to make a calculated move or maybe not make a move. And sometimes the best moves you make are the ones you don't, right? Like the Cleveland Cavaliers. Oh, you got to split up Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. Maybe they didn't, right? And the New York Knicks, the moves that they made, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, maybe those are the moves they shouldn't have made. So at some point, you'll get there as the Toronto Raptors in 2027. Maybe you get bounced in the first round. And now you got RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, hypothetical 2026 pick, hypothetical 2025 pick. You got all these players, and suddenly there's a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade on the table, or a trade for a disgruntled Jaren Jackson Jr., and you got to make a decision. Do we want to move off of a future pick and this to get this player, right? At which point you'll accelerate your window or you'll shrink your window. What did the Raptors do with the Marc Gasol trade? They shrunk their window. What did the Raptors do with the DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi Leonard? They shrunk the window. Have they kept JV and DeMar? they would have been good for the next 4 years, right? They would have continued to be good until 2022. They shrank the window because they wanted to go and accelerate the odds of one season in order to and didn't mind diminishing the odds in subsequent seasons because clearly in the moment that they made the trade JV Marc Gasol was a better player. But they knew within a year Marc Gasol was going to regress, right? They're not stupid. They know that. They knew they trade for aging player. It was the same thing with Terrence Ross, Serge Ibaka. So at some point, you're going to realize that maybe, at some point, trading, I don't want to say trade RJ Barrett because it triggers a lot of people, but trading an RJ Barrett for a player who's 27 but is way better than RJ Barrett at that moment, even though he's 3 years older than him, it just provides you a higher ceiling for those 3 years as opposed to a lower ceiling for 6 years. I don't know. So I think that the Raptors will compete largely with the Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks. If I'm putting on my, Rob Stradamus hat, I think those are two teams. I think there's a couple of teams that can be sneaky good, like the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Indiana Pacers potentially if Tyrese Halliburton turns it around. But I think the Raptors will be a top 4 team in the East by 2027. That's my vision for it. And I think that if I'm betting, I think between 2028 and 2032, they'll win at least one championship. Or, okay, let me not say championship. I'll bet they'll at least get to the finals between 2020, 2027 and 2032, somewhere in there. Get to at least one finals. That would be the goal. Now, of course, if you get to the finals, now you deal with one of San Antonio or Dallas or OKC. At which point, good luck. Good luck. And that's where I think a lot of people say, you got to tank. You got to tank. You got to get something to compete with those teams, man. And I hear you. I hear you. If I was running this team right now, I probably would be tanking. I got to be honest. 2-12 start. Yeah, I don't even think I would have won yesterday's game. I think I would have just tanked all the way through. And I think, I would have scrapped out pieces and I probably just would have tanked. But that's not the way the Raptors are choosing to do it. And I respect that, because at some point we talked about Hinkie Sixers. They didn't win a championship. They didn't go to an Eastern Conference Finals. You got to trust at some point that winning is going to create winning. You got to trust at some point that all these teams that just lose year after year after year never learn how to win because they never tried to win. You got to have nights like last night where you really do go through the lumps and you finally break through. The Raptors have played. How many games have the Raptors played so far? They're 3-12, so they played 15 games so far. I would say 13 of those games have been winning games. 13 games where you've played well enough to win, and you've lost most of them. You lost 9. And then 2 games where you just did not play well enough to win and you lost them. That's a win. That's a win. As far as I'm concerned, this team is 9-3. Not 3-9. Or sorry, 9-3 and what am I doing here? 12-3. They're 12-3. Not 3-12. They're 12-3 because again, if you execute your plan, you win. That's how you measure the success, right? And if at some point you go 40% on the games that you should have won, you're not going to make the playoffs. You'll have a lottery pick. And at which point, let the lottery gods do what they will. But again, when that player gets here, they're going to have a veteran-laden group that's going to be smart, mature, serious-minded, and they're going to learn what it means to be a pro. Right? People always talk about like culture. I don't think they understand it too well. But you imagine like how does a kid who's 18 or 19 years old, who's coming from broke, humble beginnings, even though NIL is doing a lot to, erase some of that. How does that kid who has been armed with now $4 million, right? For the first time in their lives, they have more money than they've ever had, 15 times more money than they've ever had in their lives. And they show up to Charlotte. You got LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges in your locker room. No shade. Just respect what I'm saying. Those are your leaders. That's who your coach is telling you to follow. That's who is basically being celebrated in your city, in your organization. That's the guy who has the franchise keys. What's that telling you? Model yourself after him. You will only go so far. You see him see a Joel Embiid come late to practice every single day. You see him late for the team bus. You see him. How serious are you going to be? How committed are you going to be? How I mean, everybody knows, you know what I mean? One of the biggest things with the Raptors is when they got to training camp in 2018, 2019. Kyle Lowry was really upset with the Toronto Raptors, and Kawhi was a little bit cagey. And it seemed like after a few practices, they had a conversation in which they realized, oh my God, we have a championship team here because they saw who was around. You know, Norman Powell, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Danny Green, Serge Ibaka. Yeah, that's a freaking championship team. Now you add Marc Gasol midseason. Okay, now we really got a chance. That belief is very important. You see your star player come into practices blazed. You don't have a chance. You see your star player step out on the podium saying, "If we had LeBron, we would have won too." Yeah, that's a good way to never win. So I think like the building block has to be there, and it starts with your franchise player. It starts with your coach. It starts with your organization, how they deal with conflict. It starts with your organizational culture. It starts with your front office. It starts with your scouting, how well you're going to extend that window. Because I know I'm said project 2026 to 2033, but if Scotty Barnes remains healthy and Grady Dick becomes the type of player that I think he's going to become, there's no reason this can't last till 2043. It's crazy. Scotty was drafted in 2021. Pull it back. 2035, 2036. I don't know. 2038, right? My point is you can extend this window indefinitely with smart scouting, which the Raptors have proven to do. You can best your odds. And again, people get obsessed with championships. I just want a window. That's what I'm trying to impress on you. I just want a window where we can be competitive and have a chance. What do you need to have a chance? Top 5 offense, top 5 defense, top 5 player. Rough rules. Very few teams have broken that rule. You could argue the Celtics broke that rule last year with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I think Jason Tatum is much closer to a top 5 player than people give him credit for sometimes, but nevertheless, you need a star. You know, top 5 offense, top 10, and top 5 defense. Well, guess what? The Denver Nuggets didn't have a top 5 defense. There are very few teams that actually, managed to sustain this because I think 3-point shooting is throwing a lot of this out of whack. Maybe 3-point shooting is breaking some of the old trends. But one thing you definitely need is a winning culture, which the Raptors check. You need a coach who has the trust of his players and does not do anything to erode the culture of that team. Check on that front. You need a front office that is competent and is understanding the process through all the levels. Check. And you need a star player who cares about winning. Check. Now you just need time, patience, and fill out the pieces. I don't know if RJ Barrett's going to be on this team when the Raptors compete for championships. I don't know if Emmanuel Quickley is going to be on this team when the Raptors compete for championships. I don't know what Ulrich Shamshay will be. I don't know if Jonathan Mobo will be in Europe. I don't know if Jamal Shed will be in China. And frankly, I don't know if Jameson Battle will be lining up the G League. I've learned that no matter how much I love a prospect, they're probably going to go to China anyway. I'm kidding. I'm trying to say no matter how much I love a prospect and no matter what I envision for them or see in them, there's always a chance if they're not above a certain cut or above a certain level, they're probably going to end up getting cut, traded, waived, or something, or end up in the G League. So I'm not getting overly hyped and excited about certain players, but I will say this, between Jacoby, between Emmanuel Quickley, between Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, all these draft picks coming up, I think you have a lot to be excited about if you're a Toronto Raptor fan. And I hope that it's something that you trust in and believe in. Because again, I'll tell you, one of my favorite teams growing up was the Sacramento Kings. The Sacramento Kings played a beautiful style of basketball. They had a real star in Chris Webber. They had an ascending star in Peja Stojakovic. They had an aging star, loosely star, who used to smoke cigarettes in the bathroom at halftime in Vlade Divac. They had a great point guard in in Mike Bibby, who was a top 10 point guard in the league at the time. a fantastic player who once played for the Vancouver Grizzlies, but was eventually traded for Jason Williams. And they had a great two-way player in Doug Christie. And then they had a whole bunch of veteran depth, from the Brad Millers to the Scott Pollards to the Hedo Turkoglu's. Great scouting, great European scouting. And they had a brilliant coach, Rick Adelman. That team never won a championship. But you'd want to be a fan of that team every year. I promise you, it was a really fun time. Again, as a Serb, rooting for Vlade and Peja was basically like my religious birthright. Like I had to do it, and I wanted to do it. I wanted those guys to win one, but they never did. I was a big Portland Trailblazers fan. Brian Grant, Rasheed Wallace, Arvydas Sabonis, Bonzi Wells eventually, Dale Davis, Jermaine O'Neal, edge of the bench, got traded away for Dale Davis. Sean Kemp eventually, fat Sean Kemp. Who remembers that? Steve Smith, Damon Stoudemire. That was a really fun team to watch too. You know what was the coolest thing about being a fan of those teams? Every year, you walked into the playoffs and you legitimately thought you had a chance. You know what was not so fun about the 2007 Raptors? Walking into the playoffs and knowing you had no chance. Against Vince, Richard Jefferson, you literally walked into game one, you saw Chris Bosh, you saw Vince Carter, you're like, no chance. Nope. I was a Raptor fan. I know. I had zero faith. Oh, I believed. I wanted to believe, but I had no faith. But the Sacramento Kings against the Lakers, Sacramento Kings against the Spurs, Kings against the Rockets, or any of those teams, sure. I had faith. That's all you need is a chance. The Denver Nuggets have a chance every year, and for that they should be thankful. The Dallas Mavericks have a chance every year. For that they should be thankful. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a chance this year. Will they win a championship? Probably not, but they have a chance. OKC has a chance. I'm trying to say that the Raptors will have a chance starting in 2027, and hopefully they can keep that window open for a long time. I'll catch y'all later. I'm going to answer to some super chats here. Thank you very much for all your super chats and all your generosity. Johnny A. Wait. Hold on. Rank Scrub. Could Jakob get Mark Williams plus a first round pick from Charlotte? That's a good question. I don't think so. My first inclination would be to say that Mark Williams is probably around as good as Jakob Poeltl, maybe like slightly worse, but he's way younger. And, he's a better shot blocker. I haven't watched a lot of Mark Williams this year, in fairness, because when we played them, Mark Williams was out and they played Nick Richards. But it's worth noting, Mark Williams starts over Nick Richards, and Nick Richards gave us 24 and 14. So, I don't know. But I don't think so. Mark Williams plus a first-round pick would be tough. Mark Williams straight up, I don't see why Charlotte would do that, man. Jakob is way older, but that's a very interesting thing. Maybe if, a team like Detroit or a team like Charlotte, you never want to underestimate the greed of owners and potentially this feeling of like, oh, the East is wide open. Like that's something we haven't talked about, which is the trade market for some of these pieces like RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl and Bruce Brown, etc. See, less so Bruce Brown, because I'm not really sure how many teams are like, oh, Bruce Brown, that's the championship team. That's the missing piece. But Jakob Poeltl and RJ Barrett really could be a really big missing piece for somebody. It's very interesting you bring up Charlotte Hornets. You know what the Charlotte Hornets could really use? A two guard like RJ Barrett. And interestingly enough, maybe a center like Jakob Poeltl. What would they trade? I have no idea. Would they trade first round picks for it? I don't know. But what's interesting is a team like Atlanta, desperate for relevance in a smaller market. A team like Charlotte, again, desperate for relevance in a small market. A team like Detroit, small market, desperate for relevance. You look at all these teams, and maybe they are thinking, "Oh, the Bucks are gone. The Orlando Magic are injured. This is our chance to make the playoffs." And you really hope, you really pray, if you're the Toronto Raptors, that there are 3 or 4 teams in the East that sell themselves on the pipe dream of the playoffs. Number one, because they get out of your way from the tank. So they add wins to a team that will otherwise be competing for you from the bottom. Number two, they may present a very interesting opportunity to sell to. So we'll see. I just think from the Raptors politically, it'd be very difficult, if you're like 4 or 5 games under 500 to start tearing it down. But when you're 12, 15 games under 500, Nobody will care. I listened to Blake Murphy and JD Bunkus today on the JD Bunkus podcast. That was a very interesting listen. Like, shout out to Recruiter Dude who told me to listen to that, saying, look at the mess JD Bunkus is talking. I actually didn't think he was that out of line with what he said. And be honest, like I agreed with 85% of what he was saying, and I didn't know what to do with that. It gave me a lot of complicated feelings. I generally think JD Bunkus is an absolute idiot, but he made a lot of sense. He did make a lot of sense. And I guess one of the main things he was talking about, I mean, he kind of dismissed the idea of Scotty as a superstar and kind of said like the Raptors need to go for Cooper Flag, et cetera, et cetera. But it kind of made me think like, you know, I'll disagree with you 100% on the Scotty not a superstar thing, but I understand the point that he's making about like Cooper Flag bringing a lot of buzz to Toronto. He probably would. Johnny is saying, who will our center big be for this core? Seems our biggest question. We sure not Yak for the next few years. Great show today. Thank you so much, Johnny. I appreciate it. And who will our center be for the big core? I'm gonna guess that center is either Ulrich or is going to be drafted over the next 2 years. That would be my guess. And you know what? With the way bigs slip in the draft now, like look at Donovan Clingan, you know, going down to what was he, the 7th pick, 8th pick? Zach Edey, 8th pick, right? Kalel Ware, 15th pick. Deron Holmes was 22nd pick. Ulrich was the 57th pick, right? So in a deeper draft, in a better draft, maybe a guy like Donovan Clingan falls down to 15. Maybe a guy like Kalel Ware is the 33rd pick, right? So you don't know. Like Naz Reid was a 2nd-round pick, you know? Naz Reid would definitely be your starting center today. So you get my point. Like I think if you're smart draft, like I just love the fact that the Raptors have 5 draft picks over the next 2 years because these are 2 very good drafts. The homie nicked with a very generous super chat here. Point taken on RJ. The fit is a bit awkward in some ways. The upshot is that with him developing so nicely and playing well, the return on the next trade might be even better. Nice bit of business. I completely agree. I think the Raptors killed that next trade 100%. They've been absolutely rocking it. You know, I still think OG is a little bit overpaid. Some people might call that hating. Certainly not hating. OG is one of my favorite players. Love OG. I value all the intricacies and all the small stuff he brings. But please don't make OG something that he's not. Okay? I've watched great defenders my whole life. I've been enamored with great defenders. It's a big reason why I like OG. At no point in my life have I ever thought of OG as a top 3 defender in the NBA. Not once, not ever. In fact, it'd be very tough sometimes for me to put him top 10. All I knew was he was the best defender on the Raptors. I don't know how that translated to he's the beacon of hope and the savior and Jesus Christ for the New York Knicks, but hey, power to you. He has a lot of limitations, and one of them is health, and now the second is contract. RJ Barrett does not have such afflictions. He's under contract for the next 3 years and is looking very reasonably paid at that price. And so, you know, you got 2 starters and potentially a really good role player for Precious Achua, Malachi Flynn, and OG Anunoby, who gets a massive hike and an extension. I mean, honestly, yeah, I'm cool with it, especially if OG wanted the 42 million. I'm good with it, man. Like, if we were not going to pay him that, we're going to lose him for nothing. We got RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. We solve a lot of pieces. And plus, again, the Mikal Bridges thing that I mentioned with RJ Barrett is very true. If RJ Barrett becomes a competent defender at any point, you realize what happens to his trade value, right? Like, it goes up. Like, I guarantee you it's already like 35 to 40% higher than it was when you traded for him. 100%. Like, everybody's talking about him right now. I'm telling you. I got friends in LA. I got friends in Austin. I got friends in Portland. Like, they're all telling me, like, yo, your boy RJ, he's going crazy. Like, people are talking about this. This is awesome. You know, it's great to see. Maybe other GMs will see that as well. Ulrich will be a rotation player maybe as soon as next year based on his meteoric development. We shall see, for sure. Sonny Ancien saying, I like RJ's leadership. I wouldn't trade him. He's just a number 2, number 3 option. I see that. I hear you. I think the main swing skill for both him and Jakob will be defense. See, I'm not expecting Jakob Poeltl to be a shooter, and I'm not necessarily sure I ever expect RJ Barrett to be like a superstar. And so defense has to be like, that's a base minimum. A big who does not defend, who does not shoot, is not a big you can have in an NBA court. I'm just sorry. You can't. You consider like most bigs. What are they? They're specialists. Most bigs are specialists. some players, like, like look at the Boston Celtics. You're gonna go through the Boston Celtics. What do they have? They have a big who can shoot. They have two bigs who can shoot. And if Jason Tatum plays four, they have three bigs who can shoot. So you got to deal with Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and you know what I mean. And then you take a look at certain teams which don't have bigs who can shoot, like an Isaiah Hartenstein, and you realize he can still shoot a little bit. Hart can shoot, man. Like, I mean, I've seen Isaiah Hartenstein in the open practice, and he can shoot. So maybe that's one of their big plans is they're going to get Isaiah Hartenstein shooting threes. There just isn't a lot of, there isn't a long future for bigs who can't shoot in the NBA. I understand the Raptors being successful with Yak. and again, with RJ, the whole thing is defense, right? And the other thing that I mentioned earlier is like positional versatility. One of the things that Blake and JD talked about today was, how much they sort of like the offense running through RJ as a facilitator. And I gotta say, I think that's probably interesting. Like RJ has shown about as much point guard tendency as Emmanuel Quickly thus far. And I'm gonna put it on record, neither one of them are point guards. So it's kind of like very floppy the fit you have, right? You have these three players, all of whom possess some good point guard traits, but none of whom are like full-time point guards. And so maybe that's cool. Maybe you don't have to have a full-time point guard. Maybe that's the Denver Nuggets model, right? They don't have a full-time point guard. Is Jamal Murray a pure point guard? No. Is Nikola Jokic a full point guard? No. Is Aaron Gordon a full point guard? No. That's what makes them so cool. That's what made them a championship team. They could have three people who can competently bring the ball up the court. That was actually pretty cool, right? So maybe that's what the Raptors are doing. Maybe nobody needs to be a point guard, but defensively, someone's going to need to be a point guard, and someone's going to need to be guarded like a point guard, and someone's going to need to guard fours. And I think that's where you take a guy like an RJ Barrett or a Brandon Ingram to a lesser degree, or a Karis LeVert, and you start to say to yourself, what is the versatility and upside on a player like this? What do they do for me defensively? How do they operate off the ball? I think, as I mentioned many times, RJ's saving grace so far for me, and why I think he could potentially be a part of this core, is how quickly he makes decisions. Last night, notwithstanding, when he played that game with Scotty, it was probably one of his worst games of the season, in fairness, but he was coming right back from an injury at that point. In that game, he made really quick decisions. It was immediate pump fake and drive. It was catch, immediately move the pass as a connective playmaker. It was come off the screen and go right downhill. There wasn't a lot of dancing with the basketball. And as long as he can continue to evolve as an efficient scorer that way, I think there will be a role for him on this team. And just, again, it's like a very incomplete first option and a very incomplete third option. And it's like, what do you make of that? I don't know. Johnny A saying, I hope Shed can turn it around. I have no doubt he will turn it around. He's a very hard worker. I think the only doubt I have is his size and how he plans to finish and his jump shot. That's it. He competes hard. He competes really hard defensively. But I'm less sold on him than I was 2 weeks ago, if that makes sense. So if this is a stock, I'm certainly not sold any Jamal Shed stock. I love Jamal Shed. I'm rooting for him super hard. There's a reason he's the picture on our background on X/Twitter. I'm rooting for this guy super hard. It's really hard to make it as a 6-foot guard, though. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over. It's hard to make it as a 6-foot guard. And if he makes it, kudos to him. If he's out of the league, it won't be for a lack of trying. All right. I got you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to all of you, who tuned in. I had a major headache prior to this one, trying to cut out coffee. It's been a bit of a grind, but yeah, trying to switch over to tea. Anyways, talk to you guys later. Make sure to hit like on this video on the way out. Hopefully this was a nice, engaging discussion for you. Good night. And Zigsaw Puzzle saying, hey, Rob, was cool to see you on playback tonight. Yes, I decided to chime in on playback. If there's going to be a fake Pensar basketball in playback, I figured the real one should be around. Thank you all for, all the recent subscribers. We've been growing a lot recently. This has been really cool. So thank you. And fourth quarter gang, how you guys doing? I hope you're sticking to your goals. I hope you're doing good stuff for yourself. Make sure to drink water. Make sure to stay hydrated. Make sure to get a lot of sleep. Thank you guys. Have a good one.